podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
We are exactly halfway through the season and it is official. The Indianapolis Colts are all in this year after making a blockbuster trade on deadline day for star defensive back Sauce Gardner. They send their next 2 first-round picks and a player wide receiver Adonai Mitchell to the New York Jets. And if the Colts are all in, then the Jets are certainly in a full-on rebuilding mode as they traded away yet another star defensive player. This time, it was the Dallas Cowboys who were part of the trade. Embarrassed on Monday Night Football, they then, 24 hours later, pulled the trigger on a move which sees them send a 2027 first-round pick plus a second-rounder in next year's 2026 draft and defensive tackle Marzi Smith in order to require defensive tackle stud Quinnen Williams. Elsewhere, once again, we saw anything can actually happen on any given Sunday as the Vikings, Panthers, Steelers and Cardinals all upset the odds this past week. Okay, well, the Cardinals might have been on Monday, but you get my drift. And the question being asked in Cincinnati, how much more can Bengals fans take, having had to sit through and witness yet another defensive horror show as they go down in the most dramatic fashion possible to the Chicago Bears? Well, let's see if we can find a few answers for you as we turn the page and look ahead to Week 10 in the NFL.
Graves on Gridiron with Richard Graves.
Hello, welcome along to the show. This is Graves on Gridiron. I am your host, Richard Graves. And before we go any further, we will look back on Week 9, the picks made on Graves on Gridiron. We went 1-2 yet again against the line. The Broncos were good. They came through for us as underdogs on the road in Houston. Elsewhere, though, the red-hot Indianapolis Colts simmered, but then cooled somewhat on the road against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the Detroit Lions, wow, did anybody see this one coming as they come up short to the J.J. McCarthy-led Minnesota Vikings at home? 1-2 against the line in Week 9 means that for the season, the show's record stands at 10-15-1. But as we reach the halfway mark, it's time to get real. And that's what I intend to do between now and the end of the regular season right here on Graves on Gridiron. If you are new to the show, welcome along. It's not too late to join. The premise of this is simple. Each week, I'll look at the slate of games on offer and pick 3 against the line set against the odds makers. We will dissect those matchups, and when it's all said and done, I will give you my thoughts on the way to go. 10-15-1 simply isn't a good enough record. Much like the Dallas Cowboys, it's a head-scratching season so far, but it's time to make a difference. And we're going to start as we look at those New York Jets, fresh off a bye week, about to host the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland, likewise, off a bye week, but it's been far less dramatic in Cleveland compared to the last few days with the New York Jets. The Jets, of course, went into that bye having just recorded their first win of the season against the Cincinnati Bengals, coming back from a double-digit deficit. Everybody's feeling good. Well, things have changed a little bit now. The defensive side of the ball was seen as their strength, but they come out of a bye with no Sauce Gardner in the secondary and now no Quinnen Williams to lead the pass rush on the defensive line. And if you need an idea of just what a difference many people think that's going to make to this Jets team, well, before trade deadline day, look at this matchup. The odds makers had the Jets at 2-point favorites. Having traded away 2 stud defensive players, the line now reads the Jets are 2.5-point underdogs at home. That's a 4.5-point swing. As I said, both teams have had time to rest up. Cincinnati have been good for many teams this year. They were good for the New York Jets and their beleaguered quarterback, Justin Fields, as the Jets went into Cincy and got their first win of the season last time out. The Browns have had a couple of weeks to mull over their 32-13 loss in New England. Now, look, I'm not going to pretend this is something it isn't. Rookie Dylan Gabriel at quarterback, Jerry Jeudy, the star wide receiver, David Njoku, the best of their tight ends, Rushy Quinshon Judkins leading the backfield. They aren't exactly names which are going to instill fear in opposing defenses. And yet, you look at Quinshon Judkins at running back. He's questionable with a shoulder injury, but I think is trending in the right direction. He's second in terms of rookie running backs in total rushing yards this season by 1 yard to Ashton Jeanty, who's by general consensus the best of the running backs to come out of this year's draft. Ashton Jeanty has 487 rushing yards. Quinshon Judkins has 486, and he didn't even play a snap in the first couple of games. Remember, he was the last player of the rookie class to sign his professional deal. And then you look defensively what the Cleveland Browns bring to the table here. They're the number 2 ranked defense in the National Football League. They rank 5th against the pass, 9th in defending the run. And you look on the other side of the ball, what has been the biggest problem this season all along for the New York Jets? It's not been necessarily on defense, it's been on offense. They can barely string 2 successful drives together. Part of that is because Justin Fields at quarterback holds the ball way too long, in fact, longer than any other starting quarterback in the NFL right now. And that's a problem at the best of times. I'll tell you something, it's a bigger problem when you look across that offensive line and coming your way on the opposing defense is Myles Garrett, the former Defensive Player of the Year, second in the NFL this season with 10 sacks to his name already. You're telling me you've got a quarterback who isn't the most accurate anyway, doesn't have a ton of weapons. Remember, their best wide receiver, Garrett Wilson, has missed the last 2 games with a knee injury. It's debatable whether or not he's going to be fit enough to take the field this week. Hey, and you're telling me he's going to run around holding the ball and you've got Myles Garrett hunting him down and that's a successful formula? I am just not buying it. I'd already looked at this game with the Browns as 2-point underdogs at the start of the week and thinking, I am taking that all day long. I am not deterred in the slightest by having the Browns as 2.5-point favorites on the road. I think this is a game where their defense dominates. I think you've now got a severely weakened defense for the New York Jets, having seen Quinnen Williams from the defensive line disappear to Dallas. Sauce Gardner, one of, if not the complete shutdown corners in the NFL for me. He's now not guarding one side of the field. I think we could see a day when the Cleveland Browns have some fun here. It could be another hapless day for Aaron Glenn, the head coach of the New York Jets and his organization. Give me the Cleveland Browns to win outright and in process cover the line at minus 2.5. Okay, 1 game down, 2 still to go. Keep it right here. We'll be back in a few short moments.
Graves on Gridiron with Richard Graves.
Welcome back to Graves on Gridiron. We've already looked at the Browns and the Jets. We've discussed the drama that we saw in the NFL this past week on trade deadline day. 2 of the teams that weren't involved in any of the deadline day drama are up next in our slate of games to look at. The Detroit Lions at 5-3 this season go to Washington to play the Commanders, 3-6 on the year. Remember, the Commanders made it all the way through to the NFC Championship game before coming up short to the Eagles last time around. En route, they stunned the Detroit Lions by going into Detroit and knocking them out of the postseason. Don't you forget, because Dan Campbell, the head coach of the Detroit Lions, isn't going to forget. He's going to have a long memory, and I think we're going to see this play out here. Remember back in week 2 when the Chicago Bears came up against the Lions and all the talk was of head coach of the Lions, Johnson, coming in, former offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. Sorry, head coach of the Bears coming in, former offensive coordinator for the Lions. And Dan Campbell showed no mercy as he converted on 4th down attempts and just ran up the scoreboard. They put over 50 points on the Chicago Bears, effectively proving a point. I think we might see something similar this weekend. And you know what? So do the odds makers, because they set the Lions on the road as heavy favorites coming into this game. They are 9-point favorites going into this game. And the Lions come in here with a point to prove as well, because they were on the wrong end of a stunning upset last weekend in their own building, coming up short 27-24 to the Minnesota Vikings. Meanwhile, the Washington Commanders have had time to rest up and think about what's going on, but they're in trouble. They've got no quarterback, Jaden Daniels. Remember, Sunday Night Football, they were in Seattle. They lost 38-14. It was 38-7, I believe. Jaden Daniels was still in the game. And then a freak injury as he gets tackled to the ground, puts his left arm out, dislocates his elbow. I suspect he is done for the season. He is not the only starter that the Washington Commanders are going to be missing in this game, because on the defensive side of the ball, Frankie Louvu, the linebacker, suspended for one game, having been found guilty of making a hip drop tackle in that loss over there in Seattle. It all means that there's unrest in Washington right now, to the extent that this week, prior to the deadline for trades passing, some members of the local media were openly calling out for trades to be made to sell players, pick up picks ahead of the draft. Veterans like cornerback Marshawn Lattimore is being accused of giving away too many pass interference penalties. He could have been one that they were looking to unload. As it was, nobody left the Washington Commanders. Nobody arrived either. And now, when your luck's down, because here come the Detroit Lions. Again, I emphasize, the team the Commanders eliminated from the playoffs last season. And along with the Lions comes Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, David Montgomery, Jameson Williams, Jared Goff, this plethora of offensive talent, and they're coming off the back of a defeat that will have stung. Remember, the previous two defeats that this team suffered this season, they bounced back in impressive fashion the following week. Remember, they lost to the Green Bay Packers week 1. Week 2, they beat Chicago by 31. They lose midway through the season. They come back, beat the Bucs by 15 points. And now you've got a beat-up, injury-riddled Washington Commanders team that weren't playing that well to start with anyway. They've only won 3 games all season. And they've got to find a way to quieten the number 2 ranked scoring offense in the NFL this season. The Lions are putting on an average of over 29 points per game. And then they've got to find a way past the number 8 ranked defense. I just don't see any which way you dress this up that the Commanders even keep this close. I took the Lions last week and they made us look like fools. Do not do it to me again this week, Detroit, because I am on that Lions bandwagon. We're taking the Detroit Lions to prove me right. Take the Lions not only to win, but cover the spread at -9. Okay, on to our third and final game. We're saving the best for last. It is Monday Night Football. The reigning Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles off a bye week, going up to historic Lambeau Field, the home of the Green Bay Packers. The Eagles come into this game with a 6-2 record. The Packers 5-2-1. That won, of course, by virtue of a 40-40 tie on Sunday Night Football a few weeks back in Dallas against the Cowboys. And the Green Bay Packers, well, they have something to prove as well coming into this game, because they were upset, some will say humiliated at home last weekend by the Carolina Panthers, going down 16 points to 13. And for me, their quarterback, Jordan Love, has some questions to answer. Do not forget, in that defeat to the Panthers, not only did the Packers only put 13 points on the board, they did so without punting the ball away once. 0 punts in the entire game. So you've gone for it on 4th downs. You haven't been stopped deep enough in your own territory to force a punt, and you only put 13 points on the board. This is a team that has Jacobs at running back. This is a team that has wide receivers in the form of Romeo Dobbs, for example, Christian Watson, a wide receiver. Now, fine, okay, I understand they lost their star tight end in that game to injury, and he appears to be done for the season as well. That is a problem. But on the other side of the ball, you pulled off a big trade yourselves, even before the season started, in acquiring Micah Parsons for a couple of first-round picks just before the start of week 1 this season. Do you know how much he affected the game and affected Bryce Young last weekend in that defeat to Carolina? Frankly, he didn't. 0 pressures for Micah Parsons in that game. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, he didn't have a sack, it was a bad game. He didn't even pressurize the quarterback in that game. That cannot be allowed to happen in a tight game. You brought in somebody like Micah Parsons to make a difference in those games. He has a point to prove coming into this weekend's matchup. And alarm bells are ringing all over the place for me when it comes to the Green Bay Packers. You look at their record now this season. They lost to the Browns at home. They tied in Dallas. They narrowly beat the Cardinals in a game when they were far from impressive on the road. And then you lose at home to the Carolina Panthers. Look, you're a team with a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense, yet that is not translating into results on the field right now. 5-2-1 does not scream to me Super Bowl champion elect. And now you're going to prove yourself because you're going up against a team who are the reigning Super Bowl champions in the form of the Philadelphia Eagles, a team who decided to make a move on the trade deadline day when they acquired Jalen Phillips to aid their pass rush from the Miami Dolphins for a third-round pick. Now, they do have a question mark on offense. A.J. Brown has had a hamstring injury which has sidelined him, and it remains to be seen whether or not he will have had enough time to recover with the bye week to take any part this weekend. But even so, this is an offense which coughed a bit and spluttered out of the gates at the start of this season, but has quietly moved into a top 10 scoring offense. They're averaging 26 points per game. Saquon Barkley finally burst into life before going into the bye when he played against the New York Giants and ripped off a 50-yard TD run. They scored 28 against Minnesota and 38 against the Giants in their last two games to bounce back from a 2-game losing skid. This is a team that's already beaten the Chiefs. They've already beaten the Rams, and frankly, they should have beaten the Denver Broncos as well. And we all know on this show how highly I rate the Denver Broncos. They are my pick to win it all this time around. This Philadelphia Eagles side, for me right now, are the best team in the NFC until proven otherwise. And this is a show-me game for the Green Bay Packers. You've been hyped up. You've got star talent on your team on both sides of the ball. Are you the real deal? Well, if you are, this is your coming out parade this weekend. You are 2.5-point favorites at home to the Super Bowl champions. Show me you warrant that. I don't believe it, and as a result, I'm not going to take it. Let's go with the Philadelphia Eagles on the road. 2.5-point dogs, you're the champions. You're fresh off a bye week. You should be offended, and I think you use that as motivation to make a point and win on the road here. This is the business time of the season, the second half. We're looking at the run of the postseason. This is when the Eagles come into their own in the NFC, and they're going to show us once again this weekend. Take the Philadelphia Eagles to win the game and cover at plus 2.5. Okay, 3 games in the books. We've set our record through 9 weeks of the season. It doesn't look impressive. It doesn't impress me. This is where we begin the turnaround. 10-15-1. I want to be saying this time next week, that record reads 13-15-1. How are we going to do it? Here's the recap. We're taking the Browns to cover as 2.5-point favorites on the road to the New York Jets. Then it's the Lions going to the Commanders. The Lions are huge favorites in this. -9 looks a big score. I don't care. I'm with the Lions all the way. Take the Lions to cover at -9. Before we finish up on Monday Night Football, the Eagles and the Packers, the pick of the matchups through Week 10. The Eagles come off a bye and show they're the real deal once more. The reigning Super Bowl champions, insulted as 2.5-point dogs coming into this game. They cover that. Take the Eagles at plus 2.5. As I always say at this juncture in the podcast, it's about enjoyment, folks. Enjoy the action that's presented to us on the field. Use this as something to enjoy certain matchups, specific highlighted matchups along the way as well. If you've got any thoughts, any opinions, feel free to hit me up on social media. On X, it's Richard Graves1. On Facebook, it's Richard Graves RDG Media. And on Instagram, it's RDG Media UK. It's been a blast as always. There's been plenty to talk about through the opening 9 weeks of the season. There'll be plenty more, you better believe it, as we make the turn into the second half of the regular season. But for now, so long, everybody.
Subscribe to Graves on Gridiron wherever you listen to podcasts. And keep up to date with the latest on Twitter. Search for Richard Graves 1. That's Richard Graves, the number 1.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.